Good morning. Thank you for inviting us. It's quite an honor. August the 8th, Thursday night, 11:30 p.m., 2013, in our home, we lost our only son, Nicholas Thomas Speck, to an accidental overdose of heroin in our bathroom. Never did we dream that we would lose our son, especially to the disease of addiction. Eric and I, his father, raised our two children what we thought would be through the example of no drugs, no alcohol, and no smoking in our home. It's just who we were. Little did we realize that the outside would come into our son's life, the outside world. When Nicholas was 26 years old, we found out. At the age, somewhere between the age of 5 and 6 years old, he was molested by a teenage girl who lived in the apartment below us, and later by the father of his best friend. He was a baby. He was 5 years old, 6 years old. That answered a lot of questions of the anger and some of the things, the depression that Nicholas went through later in life. After the loss of our son, my brother, before Nicholas, backtrack a little bit, when we lost Nicholas, we found out when we got to the hospital the next day that Nicholas was an organ donor, which we were not aware of, but never surprised our family. Nicholas's gift was able to give life to 5 women. We're very proud of that to this day. While we were in the hospital waiting for this procedure, we left the hospital just for a little while. Our family convinced us just to leave, just to get out of the hospital for a little bit. So we went to my brother's home, and I snuck into the backyard to spend a little bit of time alone. And my brother followed me, and he pulled up a chair, and he sat by me, and I told him that I'm done, Chris. I'm done volunteering, I'm done with church, I'm done with God, I'm done. And he put his hands on my knees and he made me a promise if I promised not to give up. He had an idea, he had a plan to help other families not go through what we went through, and more importantly, to help other people like Nicholas not go through what he went through. That night, before our only son even left the ICU, NKY Heroin was born. Our family believes it was a God moment that my brother, who's a graphic art designer and realizes how long it takes to come up with logos and ideas, this came to him during the night. And with that logo in his heart and in his mind, our family took off. Within 2 weeks, I was in shock still, but I tagged along. Within 2 weeks, we were off and running. And this August will be the 5th anniversary of the loss of our son, and we have not stopped fighting since 2 weeks after losing our son. I'm going to introduce, this is my dad, Noel. Nicholas was his grandson, and he'll tell a little bit about what our organization has been doing, trying to get back to the community and to families.
Heroin, what an ugly thing. Doesn't happen to any of us, doesn't happen to anybody you know. It's a filthy disease. It's those people that stand on the corner with a little sign, I need money, or the ones in cardboard houses. That's as far from the truth as anything. It has no boundaries, whether you're a multimillionaire or you don't have any money. And the hardest part of the battle that we have is the stigma of heroin. And not only is there a stigma with heroin, there's a stigma of the treatment. Because one of the most successful ways to help people through this is methadone, an opiate. Before we had the problems enter our family, I would have been against it. You're going to help a heroin addict with opiate? There's a methadone clinic in Covington, Kentucky on Madison Avenue. 1,200 people a day come in to get their dose of methadone. They're lawyers, they're doctors, They're those people under the bridge, but they're alive, and we still have a chance for recovery. Suboxone, opiate product. Doctors are only allowed 250 patients. Do you know any other disease that you're limited on how many patients you can have? We work closely with the people in Frankfurt. Our group is small. Holly and I do 85% of it. There's 7 of us. And we had busloads go down to Frankfurt, and with our signs and our persistence, 2.5 years ago, we got a heroin bill passed, one of the best in the United States. And one of the things that was included in the heroin bill was syringe exchange. Boy, the stigma with that. You're going to give those people needles? It took 2.5 years after the bill was passed. Last week, Newport, Kentucky finally approved syringe exchange. Hep C is starting to go wild. HIV is starting to go wild. It's from dirty needles. Hep C costs $64,000 in a lifetime to treat. The needles cost us 20 cents a piece. And every time someone comes in for needle exchange, there's someone from the health department talking about, if you need help, here's where you can go. We can test you for HIV. We can test you for... A lot has happened in the 4 years that we've existed. We spend a lot of time, Holly and I, together talking to schools and to churches and to organizations. And to be chosen this year from the Northern Kentucky branches, we thank you a lot. Because we only have one fundraiser a year. That's in June. It's a 5K in Simon Kenton High School. And that's the only one that we personally raise money on. But we're able to receive a lot of help from people like you who have been touched. And if there's one thing that I can ask you to leave with, talk about this disease of addiction. We wear these shirts when we go out a lot because it gives people permission to talk to us. And it never fails when we go into a restaurant. Someone will come up and say, I like your shirt. We've had 3 or 4 people at a time in a restaurant telling their stories and thanking us for making noise. It's so difficult many times to talk to policemen and firemen who live on the dirty side of heroin because they see the same person day in and day out having to be revived with Narcan. There was a commissioner in one of the Ohio counties that said, give them 2 doses and that's it. Who is going to choose when they arrive on the scene? Oh, he's already had his 2. We've spent thousands of dollars giving people Narcan. Before we could get it at Walgreens and Kroger's, we were giving them and training them how to use it. And one of the things that really is a pride of ours, when Holly and Eric took Nicholas to the ER after they found out about heroin, they asked, I think their exact words, what do I do? Where do I go? Why is this happening? The nurse gave him on a handwritten piece of paper 7 telephone numbers. There's where you can go. We swore that our first project was going to be not to let that happen to anybody. Recently, we just printed our 36,000 copies of this. In the last, I guess, 3 years, we've distributed 36,000 copies. It started out with 30 pages, and it has every kind of support service. At first, it was just Northern Kentucky, and now it's Greater Cincinnati down to Lexington. The 3rd edition, we enlarged it to 72 pages. It's the most up-to-date because we vet this every time we get ready to print it. And Interact for Health here in Cincinnati is going to use it in their digital version. Finally, St. Elizabeth Hospital has allowed us to put it in the ERs. In fact, they printed 5,000 copies of their own. We couldn't do this without the help of other advocates. When I heard Queso talked about, that's just a little bit of how far this thing reaches out. We're helping children's homes because children are being taken away from their parents because their grandparents and great-grandparents can't raise them. The Catholic Diocese Orphanage in Northern Kentucky has more children under 6 months than any time in their history, and they're over 100 years old. The Northern Kentucky Children's Home had to start an addiction center on their campus. It touches everybody's lives. One of the people that we met who lost a son, early on when we met him, he said, "You know a heroin addict. You just don't know you know it yet." We will continue to fight, and we appreciate the support that we're getting here. Thank you.